policy implementation, right? Strengthening CSOs and governments for effective policy implementation. So today's discourse is on strengthening civil society organizations, that's CSOs, and governments for effective policy implementation that warrants attention, your attention, that is. Now, this talk show is proudly sponsored by the European Union, EU, the Socio-Economic Research and Development Center, that's SERDEC, and the Open Government Partnership, OG. And she's a renowned gender advocate with a passion for promoting social justice and human rights. Now, with her extensive experience in working with CSOs and governments, she brings a cannot be overstated. Why? Because effective policy management is critical to achieving sustainable development and promoting the well-being of citizens. CSOs process. Strengthening their collaboration is essential for ensuring their policies are responsive to the needs of citizens. My name is Udwak Daniel. Now let's look into the discourse this morning. Welcome aboard, Madam Ogi, if that's okay to call you that. Yeah? But I hope I didn't murder your... Well, anyways, though, I'm glad that you are here in the studio to have this conversation with us. Now, let's start with looking at some professional concerns. One of such would be the place of the CSO government collaboration, right? Quite a number of us have always asked ourselves, civil society organizations, how do they collaborate with the government? Implement policies that benefit citizens.
Everything about the OGP is talking about collaboration, because if it's not talking about collaboration, there's nothing government will be doing with CSOs or CSOs doing with government. So it's about collaboration where the government brings, usually government has funding, but sometimes they don't have the expertise, which the CSOs will bring on board.
Okay.
So it's very important for the government to bring their own aspect of the government interprets policies, but then CSOs are the ones that understand whether the policy is or is one-sided.
Okay.
So it's very important for, as government is even making the policies from the scratch, it's better to involve CSOs who the people understand what the people are feeling and interpret how the policy is going to affect, or whether positively or negatively, the citizens.
Yeah.
So it's important that government and civil society come together and put these policies together from the design stage, so that it's actually from bottom top,
Okay, top.
not from top bottom. Because sometimes government sits over there, they do policies that may not really be what the people need, or the consideration is not really what the people are considering. It is the CSOs who are closer, who are other work, other intervention doing with citizens, that will understand these policies, break it down and say, okay, government, do it this way. This is actually what the people are feeling. This is actually how it's going to impact the citizens. So the collaboration is actually always and at every point in time needed and important.
Now, I like that, but then there has also been some thoughts that border around citizen engagement. Now, would you say that we've seen a lot of citizen engagements in these processes? And if we've not, what do you think could be the barrier? And how can citizens also be engaged in this policy implementation processes?
Sometimes the problem is not like this, because government might just, they are not carrying the civil society along. Definitely the citizens are not going to understand. So it calls for communication that will get down to the people. Maybe if you need to do public hearing, if you need to do town hall meetings, if you need to do campaigns and all that, to tell people about the existence of the policy, reading, start calling experts to interpret what is going on. And also part of engagement, break it down, the policies down to the people then they will be able to engage and ask questions accordingly.
But let me ask you, right? Do you think, right, that should all of these that you've mentioned be put in place, that the crop of citizenry that we have now, are they really witty and matter? Do you think we've come of age, so to speak?
Yeah, I think we have.
Okay.
So there is also the issue of pushback.
Right.
When people speak up, when people engage using different medium,
Yeah.
sometimes the way they are perceived, sometimes they are perceived as being antagonistic. So sometimes people tend to say, after all, it's not my father's business. But I think there are still people who are sticking their neck to engage, telling government that if you do it this way, it's going to be more beneficial than the way you are doing it.
Just as you're doing it now too. I mean, that's why you're here, and you're educating us, in these issues. Well, we're still looking.
There's an issue with the youth.
Okay.
Talking about the recent things that have happened with the youth engaging. We talk about protest engagement, maybe through protest.
Yeah.
The way you see loss of life, human rights abuses, and all that. It could actually be discouraging for some people. Make us relent. We should keep pushing. And government is also hearing. I think in recent time, using social media, it has really gone a long way to actually make government to redirect their actions.
Well, we just hope that even the social media would not seemingly be able to speak regulated. But of course, we all know that there's a need for regulation. You agree with me?
Yeah.
Because certain content, certain information, and all of that. Well, understandably so. But yeah, let's look at, the place of, inclusivity. Do you think that this policies implementation can be more inclusive, or has been more inclusive, particularly for marginalized groups?
I can't say it has improved a lot.
Okay.
But I think there is improvement. But when we talk about implementation and inclusivity during implementation,
yes,
I still think that government should involve all the marginalized group. Their opinions should be sorted. The community, different sectors should actually be carried along from the design stage, so that when you are implementing what has been designed, not what you are just going to bring on the table and say, okay, this is what we have. It's just like the issue of husband and wife. The wife wants to go to the market. You sit down and with the husband and say, this is what I need, this is what the family needs. So
needs
not based on, okay, take this 5,000 and go to the market. No. So it has to, the implementation, the design, the implementation, how does it affect women differently from how it affects the men, then the children, the change. You will see that, or maybe let's say tobacco use.
Yeah.
You will see that these things affect women differently. The policy on, let's say, tobacco use. Women, for it, I wrote an article recently, how tobacco affects women. A woman who is breastfeeding and who takes tobacco, it affects the baby that the woman is also breastfeeding. All of these policies have to be designed and implemented in line with how it affects different vulnerable groups and different sectors. So it's important to consider the voices of all the marginalized group and tailor it to how it impacts them, affect them, and then concern them.
Right. So have we seen that a lot, as it is in this era, in this time, in this or in the past years? Have we really seen that?
I don't think
we have seen that a lot. Okay, so this is like you making a call, a plea for more inclusivity,
yes,
right?
And women participation.
Well, you give an analogy that I really love it. You know, you give a family analogy where you said, okay, it's just like a husband and wife who want to go get something and all of that. The money's brought on the table, yeah, on the policy board, and then we decide, okay, this is what we are going to use it for and all of that. But haven't we seen cases where certain monies are designed for certain tasks? I don't want to digress a lot, but let's go to budgets. I'm just saying, I'm giving an example now with a budget. Another time when the public is to now get that money has come inside, this one has thrown in, this one has come in. It wasn't part of what we, you know, in such a case, there's been transparency and accountability, especially to the people, because this might be part of why there's not a lot of collaboration going on. Because we'll open the phone line so you get to hear Nigerians also ask that question. Yeah? What would be your thoughts in this regard?
First of all, budgeting. Let me even bring it down to our official, little office budgeting.
Right.
Let's say as an organization.
Yes.
You don't budget as an accountant and say, oh, this month we are going to need water, we are going to need fuel, you need to call all the perhaps all the departmental heads. And before the departmental head come, they also meet with their department and say, okay, what do you think we need? So that what each unit needs is presented to the general budgeting
body or committee, yeah.
Committee
So it still goes back to bottom to top. Okay,
yes.
I get that. Everybody's represented, yeah.
Yeah. So if the budget during the budget planning and you ask all the ministries and parastatal
departments and agencies, yeah,
yes, to bring in what they need. So it is there that the transparency comes in. So if you are transparent about, okay, Ministry A, bring your budget. Ministry B, bring your budget. As they are bringing the budget, you are scrutinizing it.
Yeah.
Before you now
append a signature to it or something.
And then put it into the bigger budget
yes.
Template.
Yes.
So then, excuse me.
Yeah.
So you now talk about accountability. Okay, yes, Ministry A. So in the process of spending, there has to be monitoring. You can't just say, okay, take the money, go and spend. No, there has to be a process. Civil society has to come in. Civil society should be part of the time when you are collecting the budget from different MDAs. And civil society is able to look at. But you know, one thing I understand is that these budgets sometimes are not disclosed.
Right.
To understand, oh, okay, these people have brought so and so. So even when you are talking about transparency and accountability, you cannot be talking about accountability when you don't have, okay, from the beginning this was what it was supposed to be.
Yes.
Okay, in between this is what has happened. So sometimes I've had several civil society organizations talk about the fact that they don't even know the version of the budget they have. So you see, that is
so that's the problem. So that's the challenge.
Yes, if you have a budget, maybe paper A, and I have paper B, you see that we are going to be
conflicting.
It's going to be conflict. So if you are raising an issue that says, okay, in the budget I have, I've seen budget padding somewhere, and you are looking at a different budget, you will not understand my point.
Yeah.
That okay, there is something. So, but if this thing, the transparency is from beginning, civil society, okay, this is the copy that we are working with, this is what is supposed to. So when you are now talking about project implementation, civil society are able to now have a benchmark to say, okay, this was what we got. This is how it was supposed to be spent. But so far, this is what we are seeing. Then they start asking questions and start speaking up and start putting government on their toes to now say, okay, where did you get the budget you are implementing and how is it going about? So these things cannot work in nobody can work in a silo. budget tracking is something that before you track, you have to have the original document you are working with that stated that, okay, this is what we are going to achieve. So if those things are not being achieved, or if the procedures are alarmed and say, okay, government, this is not how it should be, can you retrace your step at this point?
Right. Well, we're still having a conversation with Mrs. Ogechi Obialo Usuma. She's a renowned gender advocate with a passion for promoting social justice and Cso'S and government for effective policy implementation. Now, we've touched on several areas, several questions you'd like to ask in this regard. How can we indeed get it rightly this time? Yeah? How can we indeed build that trust, build that bridge? How can we indeed communicate our thoughts and take it from the bottom to the top? Just as my guest rightfully put it, that it doesn't have to come from the top to the bottom. It has to go bottom to the top, and she explained it. You know, HAPS and number is 09, the SDG 16. And there's something about it